Senzeni na Tina Senzeni na Tina Senzeni na
I want to say something about where the topic comes from. The question is, the black body, is it still a site of oppression? Thereafter, I'm going to give my panelists 8 to 10 minutes each to speak to the topic, and then we'll just have a conversation. For me, this day in history is important because we remember the Charleville massacre. We remember the worst kind of oppression that a black body can endure, which is to be killed, which is to be murdered, not just killed, to actually be murdered. And murder, obviously, when your entire physical being is obliterated, is the worst kind of human rights violation that someone can suffer. And when we thought about how to frame today's discussion between myself and the Deputy Director of the museum, we were particularly interested in asking the question, 25 years after democracy, what has happened to the black body? And for me, there are several strands to this conversation. We talk about personhood, certainly in philosophy, which is my background, in psychological terms actually, that fundamentally as a person I am my mind. Personhood exists through language and through my psychology. What we don't do very well, at least the kind of philosophy I was taught, some strands of philosophy that wasn't in the curriculum, does better to center the physical body in our understanding of our personhood. And if I ever went back to the academy, which I don't think I would, I'll be interested to explore not just the mind, the Cartesian mind, as an important part of who I am as a person, but actually what happens to your physical body. And for me, that's incredibly important because the body is the thing that carries you through the world from cradle to death. And the fact that we are all interested at the level of psychology and language and dialogue, that's one part of who we are. But I think in many ways in public debate about trauma, we decenter the physical body. And yet when we think about colonialism, and in particular anti-black racism, the assault on the physical body, I think, is often under-described, even when we do a decent job of talking about the trauma at a psychological level. So my interest as an author, as a commentator, and as a moderator in the first instance is about the embodiment. What does it mean to live in a black body? What does it mean if you are in the United States or in Johannesburg and you are guilty of walking while being black? It is your body that institutions respond to, not your accent, not your voice, not your psychology, the actual physical body. So that's the first issue I want to foreground, and I'll leave it there for now. The second issue is different kinds of trauma that this physical body then carries. And we all have trauma, black and white people. We live in worlds in which we get scarred early on in probably the home in the first instance. And so we have developmental traumas, even at a cellular level biologically, that we have to carry with us into adulthood. And that kind of trauma is trauma that can manifest in all sorts of ways. You swearing and getting pissed off in the traffic, lashing out at your partner, intimate partner violence. And the battle there can't only be won by speaking to Pumla and Kopano as psychologists, because part of what you need to recover is not just your psychological humanism, but also reorient your relationship with your physical body, which is a very strange and difficult thing to do. And of course, not all traumas are political, but what's interesting about trauma is that it brings into sharp focus the centrality of the physical body in this conversation, which I think we often leave out when we have political discussions about colonialism and about apartheid as well. Most recently, about a month ago, I almost died. I experienced physical trauma when my body collapsed. I literally just keeled over at the gym, and an hour later found myself in high care. And the experience was very interesting, and trauma, of course, shouldn't be wasted. And one of the things I've done since then, even though it's been in the therapeutic context, which is a privilege that I have in terms of my mental health services that I have access to, is rethinking the inherent fragility of the physical body. And the body is a weird thing. You can riddle me with 6 bullets and I may survive, but the same body that survived that can suddenly have a heart attack 30 minutes later. So the physical body is a really interesting thing. And I think what's happened to the black physical body, for me, there isn't enough public discussion around that. Which brings me to the final inspiration for this framing. One of my favorite authors, and I know not everyone likes him, is Ta-Nehisi Coates. And his book, Between the World and Me, he writes about the physical body in terms of the ways in which white colonialists had used the black body in the making of American capitalism. And the thought is not new, but because he's a good writer, he really gives a description of it that is chilling. And the basic point that he's making can be easily stated. It's a basic insight, but one can lose the insight because it's that basic. And the point that he makes is that when you look at slavery, for example, racists, white supremacists treated the black body as one of the bits of material that go into the input processes. So just as you have a shovel to be able to do agriculture, you need some seeds. Then you also need Ntokozo's body, and you see it as a thing that goes into the entire value chain of capitalism. And when your body is reduced to a thing, there's no way of someone ever ascribing personhood to you and treating you with dignity. And I wonder, on this Human Rights Day, when we don't talk about economic injustice, we talk about human rights almost as if it's only about civil and political rights. But when we go to the economy and we put the economic system on trial, the other part of the trauma of the black body that will be implicated is how the black body is used as a thing, literally as a thing that goes into the economic processes that serve mostly white hegemonic structures. So that really is the issues that come up for me in this discussion. And it means that we have a hell of a lot of work to do. In 1994, we gained political freedom. But in asking the question, is the black body still a site of oppression? All of the examples I've given you in the last 8 minutes have been examples pre-1994. Life Esidimeni, Marikana are examples of the black body being used in exactly the same kinds of ways in which the black slave body was used, for example, in America in the making of the American industrial complex. What is the difference between what a white racist did to an enslaved black body and what this state has done to bodies at Marikana and in Life Esidimeni? And I want to ask that awkward question of my 3 panelists. Let's go there. We shouldn't be glib about the importance of 1994 as a moment of change, but how radical was that change when there are examples in the post-democratic era of the black body still being assaulted in ways that are eerily similar to pre-1994.